Okay, so today we are going to be talking about the automatic deployment of a multi-platform Electron application. It is fun by certain definitions of fun, which if you're here means that you would agree with me that doing all sorts of deployment, anything dev related is fun. Yeah, it's like woo. So a little bit about who I am. I'm Jaaromy Zierse. I currently work at AWSome, and we help companies do all the things better, but mostly cloud services. I recently got my DevOps professional AWS certification. It was really hard, but got it, and was really happy to do that. So I love all the AWS stuff. Thank you guys, co-workers over there. So I have 19 years of development experience in all the coolest industries like insurance and construction and government and advertising governance and all things like that. But I find that it doesn't really matter what industry you're in, as long as you're working on something cool, then it's just cool, and you get to just do cool things. And so I love being a developer and a systems engineer and just learning new tech. So we are going to be talking about some of these things today. So first of all, we're going to talk about secrets and security, and we're going to talk about AWSome, which is the app that I wrote to help with secrets and security. We're going to talk about Electron, the importance of application signing, continuous deployment, and testing of an app that is continuously deployed, specifically an application that is not a web app. So first things first, let's talk about secrets and security. So when I say secrets, what am I talking about? I am talking about passwords, database connection info, AWS keys is a big one, and anything that you wouldn't want on the front page of Google is a secret. And what traditionally developers have done is you take those secrets and you put them in configuration files, right? Because you have your different lanes. You have stage, you have prod, you have dev, QA, and you put all your secrets in your configuration files and you separate those out and then you check those into the repository. If there is one thing that I want you guys to take away from this today, it is that you never check secrets into your repository, ever. But you'll say, but Jaaromy, everything is in a private repo on GitHub. They have secure, ever. Never, ever check your secrets into a repository. But all of our devs are trustworthy, and none of them would ever leak any of our secrets, ever. Never, ever check them into a repository. And so I have a couple stories with this. A few years ago, we had our just our configuration files in our private GitHub repository, and one of my coworkers was having difficulty with the repository. He was trying to migrate some stuff into a different repository, and he couldn't get it to work with a private repository. So he thought to himself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just flip this to be public just for a few minutes, just so I can get this thing to work, and I'll flip it back. So I was unaware of this, but he flipped it to public, and within, I think, 30 seconds to a minute, I got an email from a third-party company that scans GitHub repositories that said, oh, it looks like you have a repository that has been recently made public that has some AWS information in it. And so this was not a company that we work with. They weren't hired out. They just scanned public repositories, and they had all of our configuration information. So if this good actor who told us about it, and we wouldn't have known otherwise, can do it, then anybody out there can also do the same thing, and your stuff will be stolen by bad actors. If it is in a public repository for any length of time, I don't care if it's less than a second, you have to treat it as if it has been on the front page of Google, and you have to immediately go in and get rid of all of those secrets, change all of that stuff, check all that stuff back in, and fix all that stuff. So that's why I'm saying, never ever do it. There was another example of, a few years ago, Visual Studio had an extension that you could use to handle your Git repository? Well, there was a little checkbox on there that said private, but the problem was there was a bug in there that sometimes when you checked private, it didn't actually save it as private. So what happened is this poor developer checked in his private repository, and I think at the end of the month, he suddenly got a bill from Amazon for thousands of dollars because somebody had found his keys out just on GitHub and used them to spin up a server farm, and just thousands of dollars. He thought he had done everything right, and yet still his stuff was leaked. S3 buckets, sometimes the privacy gets messed up. There's all sorts of ways that your secrets can get out there, so you never, ever, ever check them into a repository, whether it's public, private, or any other thing. So, since that is the case, we need a way to manage our secrets and our configurations in a way that is secure, that we can, if it happens that our repo gets put public somehow, all of our secrets are now, and we don't have to scramble to check to release a bunch of code to fix it. So one of the best ways that I found to do this is with AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store. Now, it's a mouthful, and it's not hidden so much as not as many people as I wish knew about this. And it is an amazing free service by AWS that allows you to, it allows programmatic access to thousands of key value objects. And so when you see parameter in this context, always think secret. So when we're talking about this, when we're talking about parameters here, these are the secrets in your configurations in there. So where is this? Where do you find it? So you can create a free AWS account, or if you work with a company, maybe you have access to AWS, go to the Systems Manager, and in Systems Manager, all the way tucked down there in the very bottom left, there is a parameter store. Click on that, and this takes you to the parameter store. And as you can see, I have a bunch of parameters stored here. And you can have them separated. The names allow you to separate them by project, by lane, like dev or prod or whatever. You can actually organize them any way you want to, but it's in a hierarchical structure, and you can search by them hierarchically. And but the key here is that if you need to have these secrets in multiple regions, like you have a US East 1, and then you have one that's in Central Europe, and you need to have the secret split across multiple regions, well, these are stored by a region. So it is really clunky to use Amazon's own built-in store manager to do this, because there is no copy-paste functionality. So if you have like 10 regions that you need to spread your things across, then you need to create it in one, go up there, flip that over to the next region, make sure that you're in the right region, and then you have to remember to flip it back later, and then you have to put everything in every single time, and it's kind of a pain to manage. So as you can see here, all you put in there is just the name, and there's some other metadata in there, but it's the name and then the value that you want to have, and it's secure value. So we'll get to how we made this a little bit better in a minute, but once you have this out there, you need to have a way to actually programmatically access your parameters. And so in JavaScript, this is how we do it. You use the AWS SDK. And now in the AWS SDK is split into multiple different sections, and the parameter store is in the SSM section. SSM stands for Simple Systems Manager. They renamed it to just Systems Manager, but the name SSM still stuck. That's why it's SSM. You need to have the region in there because it's set by region, and then you just give it a parameter object with the name, and if it's something that needs to be decrypted, you tell it to decrypt it, and then you just send it out. And in this case, I'm using my default security, and it goes out, comes back, and then you have your parameter with your values in there. And so this is the secure way that you can have all of your secrets stored in there. And now if you want to be super fancy, then you can also do it using async and await. And you can also do it using promises, or however else you want to construct your JavaScript. So now that we know how we access them, and we know that they exist over in AWS, My boss, Justin Donahoe, he specifically said that I needed to say his name, so you're welcome, Justin. He came up with the idea of making an app that would help manage these parameters. And he said, go make that. And so I said, okay, I'll go make that. And then I thought to myself, well, I made 1 million web apps. I don't want to make a web app for this because I don't want to have to worry about managing anybody else's security. So how about I create an Electron app so that it's just an application that people can install on their machines and they don't have to worry about connecting with me and me saving any of their secrets or anything. And since then I thought, well, since I'm going to make it an Electron app, I'd really like to make it open source because I love open source. And if I'm going to make it open source, I want to make it available to as many people as possible. So I also want it to be on as many systems as possible. So I wanted to release it for Linux and for Windows and for Mac. And Electron is made to be able to do that, but sometimes it can be a little tricky. And if you want to have everything automated, it takes a little bit of work. But before we get to that, let's talk about Secret Awesome. And I know awesome is spelled wrong, but that's because AWS, awesome. My coworker Dan came up with that. It's super clever. Anyway, but yeah, I like it. So Secret Awesome is the app that we created to do this. So it allows simple management of the AWS System Manager parameters. It's open source on GitHub. They're at Observian Secret Awesome. It's built using Electron, and it's cross-platform for Windows, Linux, Red Hat, and Debian, and for Mac OS. So here, I'm going to give you a little demo of it. I video recorded this because I was totally freaking out that maybe there would be tech problems, so I decided to create a video and just let it go. So as you can see, it allows you to sort all of your parameters. You can have multiple profiles so that if you have your own personal AWS account and you also have your work AWS account, you can create those multiple profiles and have those saved. You can filter, so if you want to look for all of the, in this case, UtahJS, or if you want to look for all of the dev projects, or you want to look for all the prod projects, you can filter all of those. And after that, you can, I wish this was also playing on my screen so I wouldn't have to turn, but you can also edit everything, as you can see. Oh, my super secure password that nobody looked at right there. And you can delete them here, easy to delete. And this is the big part right here. If you need to clone it into multiple regions, then all you have to do is pop this up, click on which regions you want, click save, and then boom, you have it in all those regions now. Now, if you want to create a new one, you just go click on the plus button and create your super awesome new secret that you need to create. And you can choose whatever regions that you want to put it into. And look at that. So there are 3 types. You can have a regular string if you don't need to actually hide it, but you still want to store it here. A secure string or a list of strings. And I put it in there. Don't look at that. This is my secret password, guys. And there we go. Now I have my brand new secret. It's in prod, and it's ready to be referenced in my JavaScript code. Now, if I need to change these, I don't have to worry about deploying anything out to any of my releases because they're programmatically pulling all of these secrets from this store. And this is another great thing. I actually use this feature of this way more than I use any other feature, and that is a profile manager. So as you get new access keys and secret keys for different profiles in AWS, normally what you have to do is you just have to go into the file and manually by hand edit those. I use this all the time to just edit those, and it saves it and it keeps everything secure. And this information never leaves your machine, stays here secure. We don't send any of that stuff out. So that is Secret Awesome. You can see, especially if you're doing multi-region stuff, that is a much easier way to be able to manage your secrets and easy to change them individually or in groups. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Electron. So Electron is a JavaScript framework for creating cross-platform desktop apps. And some of the apps that have been made using Electron are like Slack, Visual Studio Code, GitKraken, Skype. There are actually hundreds and hundreds of apps that have been created, and they are like Slack, everybody uses, especially if you're a dev, everybody uses Slack. And if you're not using Visual Studio Code, you really should, because it's super awesome. So if we're going to be using Electron and we want to be able to build easily, we want to use this utility called Electron Forge. And it's a node package that you can install via npm or yarn, and that is, in their own words, it's a complete tool for building modern Electron applications. Electron Forge unifies the existing and well-maintained build tools for Electron development into a simple, easy-to-use package so that anyone can jump right into Electron development. So it basically tries to smooth out the difficulties in building Electron apps, especially on multi-platform, and create installers for those apps and executables. And it really goes a long way to making it much easier. There are still some gotchas and there's still some difficulties, and it's still evolving as a platform, but it is much easier to do using this tool than not. So let's look at an example of how you create an Electron app. So all you need to do is just npm install Electron Forge. That'll pull everything down. Now this is going to look like my computer is super fast, but that is the magic of editing. That allows you to skip over a lot of the stuff that happens, especially when you're building, and I will be showing you an example of that. It goes much faster when you can cut out minutes at a time. But, so this, we initialized my cool new app, and then we can start my cool new app, and then suddenly, boom, I have my cool new app, and that took me just a couple minutes, and it's an app as cool as Slack or any of those other ones. You just put that on the marketplace and people will buy it. But the great thing about this is that it is actually ready to be, this is a full-fledged application that you can run. By default, it builds for the development platform that you're building it on. In my case, it would be a Mac, but if you're on Linux or Windows, the default, it will build the type of machine that you're on, but you can tell it other ones. And this is just an overview of what I did there, the install, init, and then start. So this is how you actually build an installer or any other sort of release artifact using Electron Forge. All you need to do is say Electron Forge, make, and then you tell it the platform that you want to build it on. Now the interesting thing is that you can actually build every platform on any platform. So you can build Windows and Linux on a Mac, or you can build, okay, this is the promise of what can happen. In actuality, and what I found is that what you really need to do is actually build whatever platform you're going to be distributing for on the type of environment that you're distributing it for. So if you're going to be distributing for Mac, then you need to build on a Mac. And if you're going to be distributing for Windows, you really should build on Windows, because sometimes it looks like it really built, but some of the DLLs aren't linked right, or it just doesn't work right. And so, boom, that was 3 platforms built and ready to be distributed to the public. And this is all it took to be able to do that. As I said, there are individual settings and configurations that we don't have time to get into now that you can to get this to work, but this is essentially all that you need to do. Okay, so trust is a very important thing, especially for developers. And that's why we're talking about security, but it is possible to distribute, as I just built there, I could just distribute those out, put them out on GitHub, and have people download them and install them. And they could do that. But what would happen is they would download the application, try to install it, and then they get that really scary pop-up that says, you downloaded this from the internet from publisher unknown. And publisher unknown is super scary, because even though somebody might, even when I kind of trust a developer or somebody, and when I run their app and it says unknown, they didn't actually sign their application, it feels just a little skeevy, and I don't like it at all. We want our customers, whether it's an open source project or you're selling a project, we want them to trust us. And so for that reason, we need to do application signing. And when somebody downloads an application and it has been signed correctly, and when you go to install it, it doesn't give you the scary pop-up box. It just says, do you want to install this application by Jaaromy Zierse? And you say, oh yes, of course, Jaarome's great, let me install it by him. And then off you go and run. So one of the difficulties that I found when I was trying to get this was figuring out exactly how to do the signing and how to get the certificates. So I will go over in much more detail for the Mac one. The Windows one is a little bit, I mean, it's easier in some ways, but not in others, but we can talk about that. So to be able to get a code signing certificate for Mac, you need to be part of the developer program, either your own personal one, or if it's a personal project or for your company, it's $99 a year. You go to the account, Mac certificate create. Yeah, you create a production developer ID, you download it to your Mac, you open it in the keychain, and you create a P12 file. Don't worry, we'll go over that real quick. So here's another quick demo of that entire process. So this is at the developer, at the developer.apple.com. And so you go to production and you go, I want to create a brand new certificate. The one you want specifically is developer ID out of all of these choices. And then you want developer ID application out of all of these choices. And you need to have a certificate of signing, and those instructions right there are really good about telling you how you do that. You create that on your own machine before you get to this point, and then you choose that file, and you just say, okay, you choose the file, you continue, and then boom, you have your certificate, and you can download it. So after you download the certificate, it's a .cer file, it's a certificate file. On your Mac, you double click on that file, and it takes you to the keychain access. And then in keychain access, you find the developer ID application, you right click and say export. And then you really need to put a password on your certificate file. You need to remember that this is what you're using to say I am who I am. If you don't have a secure certificate, then anybody that gets a hold of your certificate can pretend to be you, can create an app with malware in it, put it out there, and it looks like it's signed by Adobe or Microsoft, but it's not. It's by this bad actor, and there's no way to tell because their certificate got out into the wild. So you keep your certificate secure. And then after you've exported it, then you have this P12 file that can actually be used to do the actual signing of the executable for Mac. Now, for Windows, basically, I wish I had more detail on this, but it's essentially you find a reputable seller of certificates, and in my case, we use DigiCert, but there are other ones out there. You need to be careful because you make sure that they are actually reputable, and then you buy the certificate from them, and you just download the PFX file, and you can use that to actually sign the executable. Okay, so well, I'll talk about applying certs when we talk about continuous deployment, which is actually right now. Let's talk about continuous deployment. So here's another important thing that I want you to take away from this, is releases shouldn't be and don't need to be scary. Releases should be exciting, but they shouldn't be scary. I've had so many years of my career where they were scary. For my own fault and for the fault of our teams, we didn't manage our releases correctly. We didn't automate everything. We had all of these little manual steps, and every time you have a manual step in your release, there's gonna be a problem at some point. It's really easy to make mistakes, especially if it's super complicated. So you automate every single part of the deployment process. When you want to release, all you want to have to do is say, push one button, and then boom, everything goes. It doesn't matter how complicated your application is, you can automate every single step of it. And you should work really hard to do that because it's hard in the beginning to get everything set up, but once it's set up, it will save you so much time and so much heartache later on. So, saying that, since I wanted to deploy to multiple platforms, I wanted to do Windows and Linux and Mac, I was trying to look for some sort of a build service that would allow me to do all three of those. And I didn't want to have to pay if I didn't want to, and it was just like, there were a lot of places that would let you build. Mac is the problem. Mac is always the problem. I love them to death, but my goodness, do they make it difficult to do development sometimes. And so it's really hard and sometimes really expensive. But I found Azure DevOps, and they were formerly known as Visual Studio Team Services. They changed their name to Azure DevOps just a few days ago, actually. And they have a great service, and you can create a free account on visualstudio.com. If you go to visualstudio.com, you can create a free account, and by default on the free account, you have 240 build minutes using their Mac OS agents. And you don't have to pay anything, and you can build your on a Mac using their service. And it's really nice. This is what it looks like in the pipeline section. This is where I actually put together each of my agents. So I have a pipeline, and I have a separate build agent for each item in the pipeline, and the Mac, the Linux, and Windows. And in each of those pipelines, there are separate steps that happen in the build process to get the end result and the end executables. So in this case, let's talk a little bit about the Windows version, because it's a little bit more complicated than the other ones. I mean, the first step is I install Node, and then I've already, that certificate that I purchased, I already uploaded it to the Visual Studio secure store, so I can just reference it and download it to that temporary build box. Then I just run npm install to get everything ready, and I run that Electron forge make command, specifying Windows specifically, and I'm on a Windows box, so everything's just gonna be happy, build up, and then right after that, there is a PowerShell script, and it looks and is super funky looking, but all that does is just say, use the signtool.exe to apply in this certificate using this password. Smush that all together, and it signs your executable, so that when you deploy it out there, you have the signed executable for the people to be able to happily download to their machine. And after all of these processes go, everything's built, everything's happy, at the very end, I use the GitHub API. In my script, I do a little bit of renaming of some of the files and to make sure that they're all consistently named, and then I use the GitHub release API and create a release using the version number that I have, and I ship all of those artifacts up to GitHub into the release directory. And the great thing about it is that once everything works, everything is shipped up there. I have all of these individual build artifacts here. They're ready to go, except the Git release allows you to wait until you're ready to actually give it to the public. So it'll sit there in a temporary state, looking just like it's going to look when it's actually live, and you can go in and download each of those individual files just like your users are going to and make sure that they work. Which brings us to the next point, and this is super important, and sometimes you just don't want to have to do it because of course it's going to work. Everything built, everything was fine. But let me tell you now, you gotta test them all. You always gotta test them all. Every single time you have a release, you need to go out to where your users are going to be downloading from and download them yourself and run them on the individual machine that they are, or the individual environment that they are going to be using. So you need to open your Windows on a Windows machine or a VM, and you need to do the same thing for each of the Red Hat and Debian, and you need to do it for the Mac, and do it all individually, open them up and make sure that they work. Because what will happen, and will happen to you many times, as it happened to me many times as I was doing this project, is everything will look great, except you'll have formatting issues for only one of the builds, or the icons won't look right for only one of the builds, or the functionality is broken on only one of them or two of them. And the executable works, but the installer doesn't for some reason. And so you have to go through all of those, and what you don't want, again, it goes back to trust. You want your users to trust you, and the only way that they can trust you is if when they download your app, it just works. And you know it works because you've actually looked at it and you've run it. And so I put in here, if you don't have, so if you're developing on a Mac and you don't actually have a Windows machine, Amazon has a service called Workspaces that they give you, I think, 40 hours a month for free that you can use. You can create both a Linux desktop environment and a Windows desktop environment. And you can access them basically it's like a remote desktop that you remote into, and it's just that machine, and you can download and do anything that you want, and then you can just shut it down when you don't need to use it, and then just spin it right back up when you need to use it, and it's really convenient, and you can access it from pretty much anywhere. And it's super great. I thought I'd throw that out there, but if you love doing it in a virtual machine, go ahead and do that as well. That's fine. But you really do need to test it. And if you can't test it in any of the releases because you don't have the machine, then you really should not be releasing it out into that environment. And I ran into this myself where I didn't have my Linux machines easily set up, and I was just like, it's fine, I'm sure it built. It worked on Mac and Windows, it did, but it didn't until when I finally got up and I tested it in Linux. There were all sorts of install problems, there were all sorts of issues with it. And then I had to individually fix those individual issues to make sure it worked on all of them. Okay, so in conclusion, we talked about secrets and security and about the Secret Awesome app and why I created it, because you want to be able to not check your stuff into your repository, and you want to be able to securely access your secrets. Electron is awesome. It is awesome to be able to use. I love JavaScript. I love Node a lot, and it's great to be able to create an application using the language that I love. And for the difficulties that can happen with it, it is amazingly simple to create these cross-platform apps using this language. And so Electron is awesome. Remember, sign your applications and set up every step of your build and deploy. Don't just build it on your machine, but there are services out there that you can get if you don't want to spend any money. There are services that you can use for free to do your build, so that as soon as you check it into master, you merge into master, boom, it just takes one button press, everything's released, and you don't have to do anything manually. And then test your apps. So here's some personal links. In the near future, I'm going to be putting some more in-depth follow-ups on the Observian blog. Here's my LinkedIn stuff, whatever. But if you want to download Secret Awesome, you can go to observian.com, tools, Secret Awesome. There's a download there, or you can just go to the GitHub repository to the releases folder. Either one's easy to do. And download it and use it, and use your secrets and be secure. And just finally, remember, don't ever, ever check them in to your repository. Anyway, thank you, everybody.